Well, more than 1,800 people have now died in the UK after contracting coronavirus. That figure is now rising significantly each day.
Well, actress Sophia Myles lost her father, Peter, to COVID-19. Peter did suffer with underlying health conditions, but Sophia says the virus eventually took his life 11 days ago, and she joins us now from her home in Kent. So I'm so sorry. All of us send our love to you and our very best wishes. It must be an absolutely hellish time. Just tell us a little bit about your lovely dad.
Oh, well, so my dad was 76 and he did have underlying health conditions and contracted the virus. And within, I think, only a few days of us being informed about that, he passed away.
So sorry.
Sophia, people are being hit by not just the terrible grief of losing a loved one, like a parent, like a grandparent, but then the brutal reality, in many cases, of not being able to be around their loved one as they die because of the risk of infection, that funerals are very sparsely attended. Everybody has to be apart from each other. Did you have to experience any of that?
Well, my dad's funerals, we're finding it very, very hard to arrange that because, like you just said, there's a backlog at the moment. I was one of the lucky ones. I got to see him the day before he died, and under strict medical supervision and clinical advice, I was allowed into his ward, wearing a visor and full protective uniform, but I was only given 5 minutes to be in the room with him, and I had to stand a 2-metre distance initially. They did allow me 1 moment to go in and hold his hand, but again, I was wearing protective gloves, so it's, you know, so hard because you can't have that flesh-to-flesh moment, being able to kiss your loved one's brow and hold their hand, and it was very, very obvious that his breathing was starting to slow down massively. And this is the horrible thing about this virus. It affects, the doctors told me that it affects the respiratory system. And so people are just, you know, dying because ultimately they're not able to breathe. And it's such an unnatural death because they go at, you know, not at the time that that their bodies, you know, would like to die.
Sophia, when you were there at the hospital and you talked to the medical staff,
yeah.
What did you get the impression they needed? Were they struggling, the ones that you were in contact with? Were they frustrated? Did they feel they had the protective equipment they needed?
No, both for the patients and for the people that were going in to visit at that time. I mean, they were literally, I had to wait for about half an hour while they tried to find the correct uniform for me because they are so sparse. And what I noticed was that there was just this eerie silence in the ward. The nurses were all incredibly quiet, and it just felt so frightening, and you could tell that everyone was on edge.
And what message would you like people to hear? Having emerged from losing your own father, and not being with him in a way that you would want to, what do you want other people to do and to understand? Well,
I just want to reaffirm the absolute importance of social distancing and for people to take this really seriously. I mean, I was outraged to hear that a friend of mine lives in Southwold on the coast, and she told me that camper vans were arriving and people were, you know, almost taking this like not taking it seriously, but thinking that, oh, well, I can just have a holiday because my kids aren't at school. Mm.
Sophia, some people, not many, but some people are actively pushing this idea that somehow we've now got to just take care of the young and fit and almost making, you know, like, just don't worry about the old. They've had a good life. You've just lost your dad. What do you say to people who want to prioritise some lives over others?
Well, I think at the moment, I know obviously that we just really must be so wary of the elderly. But, you know, having just heard the news that you said earlier about the 3 young boys dying at 13. And I mean, now it's just, I mean, it's out of control. And everyone has to not just think of themselves, but to think of all of their fellows, everyone that they meet in the street. I would suggest if you see an elderly person, don't just go 2 meters away from them, cross over, walk on the other side of the street and listen to the medical advice, listen to the government advice. We have to take this seriously.
And Sophia, tell me about your dad. He was 76.
Yeah.
What should we know about him? What kind of man was your father?
Oh, my dad was a very loving soul. He was a vicar. He worked in that field of work for a very, very long time. And the irony is that, he adored caring for people. The old age pensioners' home that he finally ended up in just before the hospital, he used to visit both the hospital and the old age pensioners' home to give them Holy Communion on a Sunday and at Christmas. So he gave out so much to the community, and he was a very, very selfless man.
It's every one of these losses to this virus is an absolute tragedy. It's everyone's mum, dad, grandmum, grandfather, and now we know sons. Yeah. And it'll be daughters, and it's just a horrendous disease. We really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. I mean, you talked about the funeral there. It is an issue that so many people are now having to face. When do you think you might be able to have a funeral? Are you given specific rules about how they to be conducted?
Yep, I think they're shortening the period of the service. I don't know. I think we get about 5-10 minutes, and also a limited number. We can only close friends and relatives are the only people that are able to go. So, yeah, it's bad. But listen, it's been lovely to meet both of you, albeit under such horrific, tragic circumstances.
I just really feel that, when I've seen these stories, I read an awful story in America. It was grandparents who both got the virus, and their family had to say goodbye to them by FaceTime. They weren't allowed to be near them. And I'm hearing stories about funerals with 4 people because they're not allowed to all... And you just think, even in that moment, there are people who've led heroic lives, wonderful lives, and they can't even have a tribute at the end of their life because of this virus. The knock-on effect of everything surrounding this is, I think, for so many families, horrendous. So my deepest sympathies to you and all your family on the loss of your dad.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
In the case of